We live in a world where oversharing has become the norm. Social media, casual conversations, even work environments. People are constantly encouraged to open up about their struggles, their dreams, their private lives. And while there's a time and place for vulnerability, I want to give you a perspective rooted in neuroscience and human behavior. Why you should never share your personal life carelessly, and in many cases, why you should keep it private altogether. The human brain is wired to crave connection. When we share, we get a dopamine hit. We feel validated. Someone nods, agrees, likes our post, or even sympathizes with our pain. That microdose of dopamine tricks us into believing that sharing is helping us process, heal, or build trust. But here's the critical distinction. Validation is not growth, and validation from the wrong people is toxic to your emotional health. Every time you tell someone about your struggles, your plans, or even your intimate relationships, you're creating a feedback loop in the brain. You're exposing your nervous system to external judgments, opinions, and energies. And whether you realize it or not, your subconscious mind begins to factor those external voices into your internal decision-making process. The brain's default mode network, the part responsible for self-reflection and imagination, now has intruders in it. Instead of pure self-generated clarity, you get a mix of your thoughts and other people's biases. This is why so many people lose momentum on their goals. They announce a big plan, they post about it online. Their brain gets a rush of dopamine as if the work is already done. That neurochemical reward lowers their drive to actually execute. Worse, they start doubting themselves as they hear feedback they didn't ask for. What began as excitement turns into analysis paralysis. It's not just about goals either. Sharing details about your relationships, your family dynamics, or your personal struggles creates vulnerabilities. Not emotional vulnerability, the kind therapists talk about, but actual tactical vulnerabilities. You are giving people data they can misuse, and unfortunately, neuroscience shows us that humans, when faced with envy or resentment, often engage in subtle sabotage. The amygdala, the threat detection center in the brain, picks up on those micro signals of judgment or gossip. Even if no one attacks you outright, your body will register it as social threat, activating cortisol and chronic stress responses. Every time you talk about your personal life, your dreams, your struggles, your relationships, your brain rewards you. It feels good, doesn't it? Someone nods in agreement. A friend cheers you on. A stranger on social media likes your post. That small rush of pleasure you feel isn't just emotional, it's biological. It's dopamine, the neurotransmitter tied to motivation and reward, lighting up your brain's reward circuitry. But here's what most people don't realize. This dopamine spike can trick your brain in a dangerous way. It creates a false sense of accomplishment, as if the act of sharing itself was the hard work, and that illusion kills momentum. Neuroscience studies show that when we announce a goal or share something intimate, our brain registers the positive social feedback as partial success. In other words, your nervous system rewards you prematurely. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and execution, gets less engaged because the reward already happened. You've activated the reward system before taking the steps that actually lead to results. That's why so many people say they're going to start a business, lose weight, write a book, or change their lives, and then never do. They felt accomplished for sharing it, but their nervous system never felt the pressure to act. This doesn't just apply to goals. It applies to venting about struggles or sharing intimate details of your relationships. Every time you talk about a problem, your brain gives you that same chemical hit. And while it feels like relief in the moment, it conditions your nervous system to seek more talking, not more solving. You become dependent on external validation, rewiring your neural pathways to prioritize approval over progress. The result, a life where your emotional highs are tied to other people's reactions, leaving your focus and energy scattered. Keeping your personal life private short. It's this faulty loop. When you withhold, when you resist the urge to announce or overshare, you create what's called a delayed reward system. In your brain, this is powerful. Delayed rewards activate the mesolimbic dopamine pathway differently. Instead of a quick burst, your brain builds a slow, steady release of dopamine that keeps you motivated to act. You stay hungry because there's no social applause distracting you. Your nervous system learns to associate the real work, not the talking, with the dopamine hit. This shift rewires your reward system for resilience. Your prefrontal cortex stays active, your focus sharpens, and instead of craving likes, nods, or approval, your brain starts craving actual results. Privacy isn't about secrecy. It's about training your biology to align with your goals. By keeping your personal life to yourself, you protect your motivation from leaking out. You give your brain no choice but to channel all that energy into execution. And when the results finally speak for themselves, the dopamine hit will be 10 times stronger, because it will be earned, not given away for free. Every time you share details of your personal life, your plans, struggles, or relationships, you open the door for other people's opinions to enter your mental space. And whether you realize it or not, those opinions don't just sit harmlessly in your awareness. They begin to weave themselves into your thought patterns, subtly shaping your decisions and your emotional state. From a neuroscience perspective, this isn't surprising. The brain's default mode network, the part responsible for self-reflection, goal setting, and imagination, is highly sensitive to social input. When others offer their perspectives, your brain incorporates those external voices into your inner dialogue, often blurring the line between what you truly believe and what you've absorbed from others. This is where the real danger lies. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive center, is designed to help you evaluate, plan, and act, but it requires clarity to function at its highest level. When external opinions flood in, they create cognitive noise. Instead of a clean mental workspace, you're now operating in a cluttered environment where every decision feels heavier. Doubt creeps in. You start second, guessing yourself, not because your instincts were wrong, but because your nervous system is now processing too many competing signals. Neuroscience also shows us that the brain has a strong social threat detection system. The amygdala, responsible for identifying potential dangers, reacts not only to physical threats, but also to subtle social cues, like judgment, disapproval, or envy. So when you overshare and receive even the slightest negative feedback, your amygdala activates. Cortisol levels rise. Your body enters a mild fight or flight state, and in this state, your cognitive flexibility drops. Your ability to think creatively and critically is impaired. Instead of moving forward with conviction, you hesitate. This is why so many people find themselves paralyzed after sharing their personal plans. They start incorporating other people's fears, biases, and limitations into their own mindset. A friend's skepticism becomes your hesitation. A family member's caution becomes your procrastination. Even well-meaning advice can dilute your original vision because it wasn't born from your unique circumstances, experiences, or goals. Keeping your personal life private protects your inner clarity. When you withhold, you give your brain the space to process information internally without external contamination. This strengthens the prefrontal cortex's ability to self-direct, allowing you to build confidence in your own judgment. Your default mode network operates cleanly, unburdened by other people's projections. The result is sharper focus, faster decision-making, and an authentic connection to your goals. Privacy isn't about mistrust. It's about maintaining a boundary between your inner world and the noise of the outer world. When you stop inviting external opinions into your personal space, you reclaim the most valuable resource you have: mental clarity. And with that clarity, your nervous system can fully align behind your goals without resistance. Your brain is hardwired to detect threats, not just physical ones, but social ones too. When you share personal details about your life, whether it's your goals, relationships, or struggles, you're exposing parts of yourself that your nervous system instinctively wants to protect. This exposure activates a primitive survival mechanism in the brain. The amygdala, your threat detection center, is constantly scanning for signs of danger in your environment. And in today's world, that danger often comes in the form of judgment, gossip, envy, or betrayal. Think about this: every time you share something deeply personal, you're handing over data about your vulnerabilities, your desires, your insecurities. The people you share with may not intend harm, but human behavior is complex. Neuroscience shows us that social comparison and competition are deeply ingrained in our species. The moment others know intimate details about your life, it creates an opportunity, conscious or unconscious, for them to judge, undermine, or use that information against you. Even subtle expressions of envy or skepticism can register in your subconscious mind as social threats. When your amygdala perceives these threats, it sends signals to release cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. This triggers a cascade of physiological changes. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision making, starts to shut down. Your focus narrows. Instead of staying in a calm and creative state, your nervous system shifts into survival mode. You're no longer thinking expansively about your goals or relationships. You're preoccupied with protecting yourself. This is why oversharing often leads to regret. The nervous system isn't designed to manage the emotional load of multiple external judgments layered on top of your internal challenges. It's already working hard to process your own experiences. Adding other people's perspectives, especially negative or envious ones, can overwhelm your system. Over time, chronic activation of this threat response can lead to heightened anxiety, insomnia, and even decision fatigue. Keeping your personal life private serves as a protective boundary for your nervous system. By not exposing yourself unnecessarily, you reduce the likelihood of triggering your amygdala's threat circuits. You stay in what neuroscientists call a parasympathetic state, where your body feels safe, your mind remains clear, and your energy is conserved for meaningful action. In this state, the prefrontal cortex operates optimally, allowing you to make thoughtful decisions and maintain emotional balance. Privacy isn't about paranoia, it's about regulation. When you protect your personal information, you're not just avoiding external harm. You're creating an internal environment where your brain and body feel safe. And in that safety, your nervous system can shift out of survival mode and into growth mode, the only state where true progress happens. There's a profound shift that happens in your brain when you stop broadcasting your goals, struggles, and achievements to the world and start keeping them to yourself. It's the shift from external validation to intrinsic motivation. Neuroscience has shown us repeatedly that the human brain responds differently depending on where motivation comes from. External rewards, praise, recognition, applause activate dopamine pathways, but they often do so in a shallow and short-lived way. In contrast, intrinsic motivation, the drive that comes from within, engages deeper neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex and striatum, building resilience and long-term focus. When you share your ambitions with others prematurely, the brain's reward system can become hijacked. The dopamine hit you get from social approval satisfies your nervous system in the moment. But because your brain now thinks it's been partially rewarded for the work, the urgency to act diminishes. You've tricked your biology into feeling like progress has been made. even though nothing in the real world has changed. This phenomenon, known in behavioral science as social reality, is one of the reasons people who constantly announce their plans often fail to follow through. On the other hand, when you choose to keep your goals private, something remarkable happens. Without external applause, your nervous system stays hungry. The absence of early rewards forces the brain to delay gratification, strengthening neural pathways associated with persistence and self-regulation. This is critical because delayed gratification is a core feature of successful habit formation. When you don't get an immediate dopamine rush from sharing, your brain learns to associate the dopamine hit with actual progress, completing the workout, writing the chapter, making the investment, not the mere idea of it. Private victories also cultivate a stronger sense of identity. Each small win you achieve without telling anyone reinforces your belief in your own capability. Neuroscientists call this self-efficacy, the conviction that you can influence outcomes through your actions. As your self-efficacy grows, your brain's default mode network begins to align your self-image with your actions, creating a feedback loop that drives even greater intrinsic motivation. You stop needing outside confirmation of your worth because you're proving it to yourself in private, over and over again. This doesn't mean you should never share your successes. There's a time to let the world see what you've built, but only when the work is complete and the results speak for themselves. Until then, treat your goals like seedlings. Protect them from harsh weather and curious hands until they've grown strong enough to survive on their own. In doing so, you give your nervous system the optimal conditions to focus, adapt, and execute without distraction. Keeping your victories private isn't about hiding. It's about building strength silently. And when you emerge, the strength you've built will be unshakable because it was forged in the quiet, not in the spotlight. Boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They're the invisible lines that separate what nourishes your nervous system from what depletes it. In neuroscience, we know that your brain thrives in environments where it feels safe and focused. Every unnecessary detail you share about your personal life, your relationships, your goals, your private struggles, opens a channel for external energy to flow in. And most of the time, that energy isn't neutral. It comes with projections, judgments, and even subconscious envy. Your nervous system detects these cues even when your conscious mind doesn't. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, is constantly scanning for signs of social threat. Oversharing exposes you to more of these signals, triggering microstress responses, tiny hits of cortisol that build up over time. This is why people who lack boundaries often feel drained, anxious, or unsettled without knowing why. Their nervous system is processing an overload of social input, much of which doesn't serve them. Strong boundaries do the opposite. They act as a protective layer for your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision, making, focus, and self-control. When you maintain privacy about your personal life, you reduce external noise, allowing this executive center of the brain to operate without constant interruptions from emotional turbulence. You're giving your nervous system room to breathe and your mind the clarity to think deeply. Boundaries also recalibrate your reward system. Instead of seeking validation from others, your dopamine pathways begin to associate satisfaction with your own actions and discipline. This shift builds resilience. You no longer need external reassurance to stay motivated because your brain is now wired to find motivation from within. You're training your nervous system to operate from a place of stability rather than reactivity. And there's an additional benefit. Boundaries teach others how to interact with you. When you stop oversharing, people sense an unspoken line they're not meant to cross. This fosters respect and filters out those who would have used your openness as an opportunity to criticize, gossip, or undermine you. Your relationships become healthier by default because they're based on mutual respect, not overexposure. The science is clear. Privacy isn't isolation, it's strategic self-regulation. When you guard your personal life, you aren't cutting yourself off from connection. You're creating a mental and emotional environment where the most important connection, your connection to yourself, can flourish. And in that space, your nervous system moves out of survival mode and into growth mode, where creativity, focus, and true confidence live. Boundaries are your brain's superpower. They give you control over your energy, your emotions, and ultimately your life. When you master them, you stop bleeding energy into the wrong places and start channeling it into the places that matter most.